All right, you guys. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله. الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى أهله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. So, you guys, today we have a rather delicate and something that requires a little bit of sensitivity and creativity all at the same time, and that is the art of criticism. Now, this is a fairly long conversation, so I decided to break it into two parts. Today we'll do the first part, keep it nice, manageable, digestible. And then inshallah, next week we will do part 2 of it. So, question for you guys. When approaching criticism, what do you guys fear? Maybe let me put it another way. Do you guys dread giving criticism? Because in the Midwest, there's one attitude to giving criticism. You go to New York, people got no filter. They'll tell you where you stand immediately on the spot. You come to Midwest and more you move west, people get more and more fluffy and more beating around the bush type of approach to criticism. So,
yeah, I would say in general, there's always a fear if we're talking about just like any aspect of life because you don't know how they're going to receive it unless it's like a controlled environment. Whereas like, let's say we've all worked here, together for a while. So like maybe this is like a controlled environment, but if it's something like random, you don't know, school, coworker, whatever, you don't know, you don't know if they're going to be receptive to it. So I feel like this environment, this is more like a safe space. Like the fact that we're actually talking about it, there's not too many issues. But if you're just mean in general to anybody, you just don't know how they're gonna be
that's right.
receptive.
Well, what's the worst case scenario? I mean, you guys, mashallah, I mean, we're all careful when it comes to criticism. Mashallah, you guys are like the icons of courtesy. I mean, we all see when we do what's going well session, everybody's, being deliberate and all. But what's the worst case scenario that we fear when you're criticizing? What's the worst that can happen?
Someone's going to take it personally.
Someone's going to take it personally. Very good. What else?
Someone could criticize harder back.
Okay, so what you're saying, they're going to get defensive. Can I put it that way? They're going to get defensive. What else?
It can maybe trigger insecurities and it might stick with the person for a very long time.
Are you saying
hold grudges too?
What was that, Amora?
That people can hold grudges over the smallest things.
Very good. It sours your relationship, doesn't it? There's something called the car ride test that your relationship with someone is awkward when it's awkward to think about having a car ride with them. So it may get to that point if it wasn't there before. So people fear all these outcomes. And anything else when it comes to fearing criticism, especially people older than you? That's a big thing. Someone reached out to us, I think on the hotline or one of my Islam school students, like, brother, my parents do certain things that I know are not halal. What do I do? How do I approach that conversation? It's tough. Now, you guys, criticism and being able to criticize, this is something that is inevitable. As a skill, you need it. As a leader, it's indispensable. In fact, this skill of being able to criticize is so important that Allah coaches the Prophet in the Quran on how to criticize. Ajib. We know that the Prophet ﷺ, I think so I don't have to go into too much detail, I'm going to assume everybody knows the event of what happened on the Battle of Uhud. You guys know the story? The Prophet gave a command to the archers not to come down. And those of you who don't know the finer details, just to help you appreciate, the Prophet is a military genius. He understands the strategic position of that hill where he's going to station the archers. In one narration, he told the archers, do not come down until you specifically hear from me. In one narration, takes it to a whole new level. He says, even if you see vultures coming down, eating down from our bodies, you better not leave that spot until I specifically command you. There's no ambiguity there at all. Clear communication. What happens? Muslims are winning the battle. Spoils of war are all over. And they come down. And then we know what happens next. 70 companions of the Prophet are killed. His uncle dies. A very serious, very disastrous, catastrophic event that occurs. And Muslims lose that battle. Now, imagine the awkward conversation now with those archers, those who at least who survive. What does that conversation go like? Allah reveals the Quran. فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. It is a special mercy from Allah that you were soft with them. The word here for softness is lana yalinu. just so you appreciate this word, you know, when Allah tells us in the Quran about Dawood alayhi salam, that one of the abilities of Dawood alayhi salam, that he could soften the iron, turn it into liquid. What does Allah say? وَأَلَنَّا لَهُ الْحَدِيدِ. Same word from lana yalinu. So Allah says, فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. It was Allah's special mercy. The default would have been that you were harsh and hard, but we softened you up. And then Allah says, وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَظًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. Had you been abusive, harsh, and this is the being abusive is on the outside, غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ, which is now on the inside. If you were, what's the word I wrote down for a good translation? If you were bitter and resentful on the inside, abusive on the outside, what would have happened? They would have dispersed and abandoned you. This is the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. And so Allah is telling the Prophet ﷺ, you gotta be careful, even when a crime is so severe. So what are we supposed to do? Then the Prophet ﷺ was told then, فَعْفُ عَنْهُمْ, forgive them. And then, وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ, and seek forgiveness of Allah for them. And then, وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ, and then consult them. Ask them for advice. You guys, this is, by the way, just a little bit of a tangent. This is a brilliant tip. If you're trying to make your relationship right with someone, asking them for advice is one of the most subtle and brilliant ways of letting them know everything is gravy now. Like recently what happened, just a side story. Recently what happened, one of the core academy students and I were like chatting or like texting each other, and you know, he was trying to be funny and lighthearted. So he wanted to troll. I guess that's the culture we've created now, right? So he decided to do a lighthearted troll, but he felt that the troll kind of crossed a certain line. So I didn't say anything. What happened, like 24 hours later, he sent me another message. He's like, and may Allah reward him for his spiritual vigilance. He's like, you know, Brother Amir, I keep thinking about that message I sent you, and I feel like I shouldn't have said that. That was so stupid of me. You know, I apologize and all that stuff. And I was like, bro, don't worry about it. You know, the whole pleasantries that we exchanged. And then I wanted to make sure he doesn't feel like there's anything in the heart. So immediately, an hour or two later, I asked him for advice. That smooths and removes any residue, any heartburn, or any emotional leftovers. It takes care of that. So Allah says tells the Prophet, "Fa'fu anhum, forgive them. Wastaghfir lahum, ask Allah to forgive them, and then ask them for advice." So being able to criticize and offer constructive criticism is important. What does Allah tell Musa alayhi salam? That when you approach the Pharaoh, how are you supposed to go? With guns blazing? No. فَقُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا لَعَلَّهُ. Even the man who's killing babies and committing infanticide, you know, he's like a maniac. Even someone like him, when you approach him, what are you supposed to do? Approach him with softness of speech. So I want to establish this framework. So now that we approach criticism, hopefully you guys are able to put the pieces in the right places. So what we're going to do for the rest of this conversation, you guys, I'm going to give you some usul. Usul are principles when it comes to approaching criticism. And then, inshallah, I'm going to share with you 2 methods where all these principles kind of come together. These methods work really nicely. Even if you don't know the usul, you can just go straight to the method. And, you know, hopefully these principles will be activated even if you don't realize those principles. But I'm going to start out by sharing principles. There are 5 of them. I'm going to share only 2 today. And the rest we will do for next time. All right, guys. The first principle when it comes to art of criticism, criticizing people properly. And that is, it's common sense. Some of you may have already heard it. And that is, plus them before you minus them. Very important principle, y'all. Plus them before you minus them. Okay, someone kind of break the code down for me. What do I mean by this?
You compliment them first before you give them the criticism, so that they don't feel like terrible.
Yes,
Like,
very good. Why is that, Jali? What's the philosophy behind this?
Because if you raise them up, it shows that you care about them and you actually want them to succeed in life. And
Yeah.
if the criticism you're about to give them isn't, you know, something that is just like terrible, you know?
Yeah, it's often easier to hear the unpleasant news when you have heard the pleasant before.
Did you also say deposit before you withdraw?
Very good. Deposit before you withdraw. Excellent. Excellent. Now, obviously, don't be obvious about it. Some people are a little too obvious. We're going to talk more about that later, where they're like, you can tell they're setting you up for failure with a massive punch that's about to come of criticism. And they'll just give, courtesy compliment here and there. I like you as a person, and, I respect you and all, but, and then bam, you just like shatter them. Don't be obvious about it. There's a story about one of the presidents of the United States, Calvin. I can't pronounce his last name, Coolidge or whatever. Anyway, his first name is Calvin. Let's go with that. So he told his secretary that, and so they're sitting in the office, and he tells his secretary, it's unrare for him to give such a compliment. He's like, I love your dress. It looks so good on you. This is before the Me Too movement days, so you could actually compliment someone's looks. And anyway, so he's like, it looks really good. Like it makes you look so attractive and all that stuff. And the girl is so caught off guard by this that she's actually blushing. And then immediately he's like, all right, don't be so stuck up now. I just told you this to make you feel better. Now go work on your punctuation. Now, the strategy is way too obvious. Strategy is good. Methodology is terrible. You should never be too obvious about this, but you want to keep this in mind. You want to plus before you minus. You guys, don't we lather before we shave? Don't we administer anesthesia before you do surgery? Compliments or criticism is the same way.
Brother Amir, I had a question.
Please.
So what if you do it like the opposite? What if you give them the criticism first and then you give them the plus afterward?
Then you look like you're doing damage control. It may appear that way, that you're trying to put a band-aid on a wound that you created. You can pull it off if you got a lot of tag, because sometimes people are like, I want to leave it on a good end, on a good note, on a positive note. So you can create a sandwich. Plus, minus, plus, and then just sandwich it in the middle. Does that make sense? There's in Dale Carnegie's book, there's a really good anecdote that he shares. And it just tells you, it's amazing when you actually, not only when you're complimentary, but if you apply the last step of empathy and you bring it together before you start, pounding someone with criticism, it brings incredible results. So there's a story of a guy named Mr. Gaw. Interesting name, Gaw. Sounds like the sound Abe is making now is Gaw, right? That's his name. So what happened, Mr. Gaw is part of a company that does construction. And they were contracted to make an office building in Philadelphia. TLDR, long story short, what happened is that if you know anything about construction, you do a lot of subcontracting. So someone will do the windows, someone will do the cementing, someone will do the bronze work. You subcontract to different firms and you make sure you make profit in the middle. So now this company in Philadelphia is contracted and everything's going well. The building is on schedule and they're going to be able to deliver the project on time. But lo and behold, last few days before the building can be completed, the subcontracting firm that's supposed to do the bronze work, they're like, sorry, we can't do any, we can't deliver it on time. And because they can't deliver on time, the whole project has been stalled. And you know what that means? Hefty penalties for the contracting company, a lot of fines. And now the president is furious. So he reaches out to the subcontracting company, who's supposed to do the bronze work. A lot of heated arguments, back and forth. It's like Uncle Mania, right? People are going at each other. And then all of a sudden, someone came to their senses and they're like, you know what? Let us summon Mr. Gaw, who's someone who has finesse with people, someone who knows how to talk to people. So they sent Mr. Gaw to the subcontracting firm to talk to the president. How did Mr. Gaw approach the conversation? You think he went in, punching and shoving? The story goes like this. Mr. Gaw shows up to the president's office and the first thing he says is, when I was looking up your name, this is the first compliment he gives. This is back in the 1940s and 50s, so they had different ways of complimenting. So this is what he said. He's like, you have a very unique name. In fact, in the entire phone book I was looking, no one has your name. This is Mr. Gaw talking to the president. His own name is pretty unique, but anyway, apparently the president's name was unique too. It's like, your name is so unique. No one else in the phone book has that name. And that struck a nerve with the president. And he says, you know what? my family came from Holland almost 200 years ago. And next thing you know, the president of the subcontracting firm is talking about his family history and opening up and pouring his heart out. And then Mr. Gaw goes to the next level and he's like, you know what? And this company you've built, I've seen many bronze factories before, but your factory, the efficiency that I see, the way it's spaced out is incredible. He's like, would you like to take a tour? And then the subcontracting firm's president takes him on a tour, and Mr. Gaw, being smart, every time they pass through a station, because he has experience in that field, he gives specific compliments about how that station looks productive, efficient, well put together. After this whole thing was done and it's lunchtime, by the way, they haven't even talked about business yet. Lunchtime is here. And the president of the subcontracting firm himself brings it up and he says, you know, now back down to business. I know why you're here. It's obvious to me why you're here. I had no idea that this meeting would be so pleasant. So I want you to go back to Philadelphia and tell your leadership that the fabrication and the bronze work will be done on time, even if we have to delay some other orders in the process. Man, he didn't even have to criticize.
He just deposited
like crazy. And that activates the law of reciprocity, which we're going to cover later. When you do something for people, they feel the need to return the favor. So he activated 2 rules in the process. But yeah, and y'all, especially with older individuals, you need a lot of this plussing before you can do any minusing. A lot of humility posturing, a lot of plussing, a lot of complimenting, and then you can go ahead and tell something. Recently, I was sharing, me and Anas were talking, I got a bunch of nasty messages from one individual who's like a lot older than me, because we were having a conversation and, you know, I don't know, I didn't do a lot of the lubrication, if you will. A lot of these disclaimers and compliments and all that stuff. And I just went ahead and called out one of their arguments because, you know, I'm taking a logic class. So my logic side keeps coming out now. I'm a lot protect. So anyway, I called out their argument. I'm like, you know, that's a straight up straw man, you know, or whatever I said. And the next thing you know, they got really pissed, really upset. And they're like, you know, you're trying to prove how smart you are and like hold down the list. It happened. And with older individuals, you have to be very careful. This lesson I'm learning the hard way and I'm sharing with you guys. You know, we live and we learn. We got to refine our methods. Any questions so far? Any experience you guys have had on this front of criticism conversation going wrong, either with someone your age or older or younger?
Sometimes you.
Go ahead, Mark.
I'm not gonna mention like, okay, so like one of my family members I was talking to, and then they were asking me like, okay, like how much does this person make? How much does this person make? How much?
Boy.
Like, yeah, and then I was like, to everyone I was like, I don't know, because I really don't know how much people in my family make. He's like, how much does this make? And then I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, then what do you know? Are you dumb? Like, I'm like, yeah, like, and he's like a lot older than me. I'm like, that's not my business. Like, what so I don't like approaching that is hard because it's like an elder. You know,
yeah.
really...
It's tough, man. And we're going to cover this, inshallah, in the next tip. We're coming to the second usul or second asl. So let's get into that. Actually, Anas, why don't you make your point and anybody else? And then I'll share the next tip.
Yeah, so what I wanted to say is that, like, Brother Mir, you know Chris, one of my buddies from Amazon. Like, he never really talked like good about Islam, and I never really like, even if he said something like, "Oh man, like I don't really believe in God" or something like that, I didn't really just like hit him and be like, "What are you talking about, bro? What is this?" You know, I kind of just went about my day, you know, and kept like fasting and kept praying, and he would see me and things like that. And then, you know, Brother Mir, you can even say it.
Well, Chris, alhamdulillah, I think he's a Muslim already. I think he's pretty much accepted Islam. Alhamdulillah, he's in South Dakota right now. We had a conversation. Man, this guy, the amount of spiritual progress he's made in a short period of time, it's mind-blowing, man. Barakallah feek. May Allah accept. Taqabbal Allah minna. our default has to be layyin. فَقُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّن. If that's the case with the Pharaoh, I'm sure, everybody else is far less. And we ask Allah to be able to do that. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Okay, so that was the first principle when it comes to criticizing, and that is plussing them before minusing them. Here's the second one, you guys. To the best of your ability, when you're criticizing, be indirect. Take the edge off. What do I mean by being indirect? Well, there are different ways of slicing this issue. By being indirect, let me give you a quick analogy, and then let's go deep into this. Taking someone out of your crosshair. Like when you're shooting down criticism, you're not being very, to the best of your ability, you don't want to be too pointed, too direct, too blunt, too personal. Take the edge off. Be indirect. Use third-person pronouns. Give side analogies. Make it personal to you. There are different techniques, which we'll go into in a second. But the principle is you want to be as subtle and indirect as possible, particularly if you're criticizing the first time around, particularly if this is the first time this person has messed up. There's no reason to go with, there's no reason to go charging in. So one rule of being indirect that I learned from Sheikh Yasser Bridges, which is a really beautiful rule, is avoiding the you rule. Avoiding the you. I call it avoiding the you rule, where basically, so this happened to me, where once I was attending an Al-Maghrib class, and Sheikh was covering fiqh of, I think he was presenting a class on fiqh. Anyway, when it was Q&A time, I raised my hand and I said, Sheikh, you said in class that X, Y, and Z, and then I asked my question. He's like, you? I'm like, yeah, you said in class X, Y, and Z. He's like, you? And then it hit me what he's trying to say. And then he taught us, whenever you ask a question, you want to make sure you're not putting yourself in a confrontational position with someone. In fact, people who go deep into this art of body language, they say when you're criticizing someone, you should not be sitting opposite of them. Like Anas is sitting on this side of the table, or Muad is sitting on this side of the table, I'm sitting on this side. We're literally face to face. You might as well put the versus sign there. Yeah? Rather, if this is a table and the person's sitting here, you want to sit here. So even psychologically, you're not in a fighting position. Back to my point. Sheikh Yasser Bridges taught us that whenever you're talking to someone, you want to avoid verbal confrontation. So instead of saying, you said this in class, you say something like, it was mentioned in the class, X, Y, and Z. That didn't make sense to me. Earlier, we talked about X, Y, and Z. I believe I heard X, Y, and Z. So you take the teacher or the person out of the crosshair. Very important principle, y'all. Avoid the you. Another way you can avoid, you can take the edge off and be a little bit indirect, is change the but. A lot of, how people always use but. They'll use, Anas, I love your stories. They're super elegant. But last 3 days in a row, here we go. Instead of using the word but, you want to change it to and. So for instance, if parents are talking to their kids and they're like, you did an amazing job in chemistry and biology, but your math scores suck, something along, that's how usually the conversation goes. Change but to an and. Like, your chemistry score was amazing, biology, you killed it, and if you continue the same hard work, I believe your math will catch up too. Don't undo everything with this 3-letter word. Another way to take the edge off and be indirect is you never want to do it in public. Almost never. Let me just put it that way. Sometimes you have to do it publicly to make an example or to set a standard, but that should be like salt and food type of proportion, far and few in the middle. You want to make sure that you never go public when you call people out. Very, very important. Always privately message them, DM them. Pull them to the side, whatever you got to do. Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, subhanallah, it just moves me, man. One of the greatest enemies of the Prophet was Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul. This man slandered his wife. This is the man, when they were headed to the Battle of Uhud, he took 300 of the army and went back to Medina, destroying the morale of the Muslim army in the process. This is the man who said, لَأُخْرِجَنَّ الْأَعَزُّ مِنْهَا الْأَذَلِ. He said to the Prophet ﷺ behind the Prophet's back that these refugees of Makkah, they think they're going to come and take over our land. When we go back to Medina, they were on an expedition, and he's saying this. He's like literally a fifth column inside the Prophet's army. And he says, when we go back to Medina, we're kicking these refugees out. They think they get to make the decisions, they get to make the rules. And this is a person conspiring with Quraysh, secretly, all sorts of things this individual did. Worst thing he did, he slandered Aisha radiallahu anha. You guys, the Prophet got on the pulpit. And we're going to see in the funeral of Abdullah ibn Ubay, the Prophet never publicly humiliated. Even when this became a public issue, the slander of Aisha radiallahu anha, and the Prophet had to address the issue publicly, you know what he said? He said, some people have hurt me and my family. Not Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul. Some people have hurt me and my family. And the Prophet ﷺ, to give him a saving face, Abdullah ibn Ubay. When Abdullah ibn Ubay finally passed away, his son, by the way, Abdullah ibn Ubay is a confirmed munafiq. Like revelation came down. Not in the Quran, but the Prophet ﷺ was informed. When the funeral of Abdullah ibn Ubay came around, his son, Abdullah ibn Ubay's son, comes to the Prophet and says, Ya Rasulullah, allow me to bury my father with your shawl. The shawl of the Prophet. The Prophet took off his shawl and gave it to him. One narration, Prophet went down in the grave to bury him. One narration, the Prophet sought forgiveness for him till Allah had to reveal the verse, Istaghfir lahum aw la tastaghfir lahum. Whether you ask forgiveness for these confirmed hypocrites or you don't, in tastaghfir lahum 70 marratan falan yaghfir Allah. Even if you were to ask Allah 70 times in forgiveness, Allah will not forgive them. That ayah had to stop the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from being kind to Abdullah ibn Ubay. What a hard man. And we have people holding grudges because, you didn't invite me to your wedding. I got people still upset at me for that. Oh, I wasn't important enough. Anyway, a long story short, never publicly, always privately, unless there's some wisdom that warrants it. All right, the final thing in this final tip, again, being indirect, taking the edge off, you guys. And this one is the most difficult one because there's no formula for this. There is a formula for avoiding the you rule. Just don't say you. Use a third person pronoun. There is a formula to don't be public, be private. It's easy. It's a tangible rule. Here's a third one under this second principle, and that is be creative. It takes creativity to correct people. Let me give you a few examples. Charles Schwab, this is back in the 30s and the 40s. He had a rule in his plant that no smoking, or basically there was a sign, no smoking. So once, he's the plant manager. So once he's passing by, and lo and behold, right underneath the sign, his bunch of his workers who are taking a break, they're all smoking. It's kind of like in Pakistan. If you go to Pakistan, there's a sign, please don't spit here. People in Pakistan eat a lot of tobacco. And that means, sorry for being graphic, when you spit, your spit is like brown because the tobacco mixes with your saliva. And literally signs everywhere, they say, please don't spit here. Right underneath the sign, there's like 35 different spit marks. Ajib, it's the culture, this rebel culture is like, so this is basically what's happening. They're like, don't put your shoes here. And then that's exactly where the shoes are. All right, so he's passing by so he's doing inspection of his plant. The sign says don't smoke because, it's obviously dangerous. And right underneath the sign, there are workers smoking. This is a dilemma our Islam school administrators face all the time. Don't talk in the prayer hall. And people are talking. What do? You just go and yell at them? You think that's going to work? So you know what he does? Look how creative he is, man. He goes up to those workers, offers every one of them a cigar. And he says, boys, I would really appreciate it if you go and smoke outside. Let that sink in for a second. Offers them a cigar. And he's like, I would really appreciate it if you take it outside. Look at the finesse, man. Amazing.
Like, not only did he just yell at them, like, get out of here and whatever, he gave them what they wanted, He, gave them...
I got nothing against you, right? Doesn't it? Like, go smoke, dude. Knock yourself out.
Just don't do it here,
It's hard to teach this stuff, man. This is something you learn with experience and wisdom. One of the stories I was reading, there was a lady by the name of Marge. What happened? She hired some workers to do some yard work, and part of the yard work is that she was having something constructed. So what happened is that by the time the workers were done, they did an amazing job. But by the time the workers were done, they left behind a lot of wood pieces, a lot of cut up stuff. They didn't exactly clean up after themselves, and the lawn looked, or the yard looked like a big mess. Now, she didn't want to just call them out because they did a really good job. They worked all day, and now you don't want to go be like, hey, clean up after yourself, and like, what's wrong with you, whatever, right? She didn't want to be that. She didn't want to be a Karen, basically. So what did she do? When the workers left, she took her kids and herself, and they took all the cut up pieces, all the lumber that was lying around. They gathered into a pile, put it on a corner, and neatly stacked it, all the leftover pieces. Next day, when the workers showed up, because the work was not done yet, she went up to the leader of the group and said, you know, I really love the way the lawn looks right now. I love how clean it is. Thank you for doing an amazing job. Our neighbors, like our lawn, our yard looks very presentable to our neighbors. That's all she said. She didn't highlight the fact that, do you see the lawn right now? It doesn't look like there's a bomb that went off here anymore. That's because Kid and I, after our busy schedule, took the time to clean it. No guilt tripping, no shaming, no. She's like, I love the way the lawn looks right now. You guys did an amazing job. Almost giving them the credit of cleaning the lawn, treating them as if they already are what she wants them to be. And she's like, it's so presentable to our neighbors. Lo and behold, next day, the same day when the workers were done, they painstakingly cleaned up all the little pieces that were lying around without being asked. It takes a little creativity. Have you guys ever had someone who was very creative in criticizing you? Someone who didn't just call you out and shatter your self-esteem?
You?
I don't know about that. But yes, it's WIP, work in process. Anybody
You're
else?
not supposed to use the word you. You said I. It was mentioned that. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
In compliments, you can, not in criticism. But yes, a foot in the door. If anybody wants to share, please do. I need a break from talking. Being creative, y'all. It takes a little bit of thinking, a little bit of empathy, a little bit of forgiveness, a little bit of compassion, a little bit of the realization that we're all frail. We all have common frailties. One story I was reading of a guy named Abbott. So basically, Abbott is like a priest. So he's an experienced public speaker. So he was invited to speak at a memorial of his dear friend. So he has to do a eulogy. He has to like talk about him. So he wrote a speech, wrote and rewrote, refined it to the best of his ability. And then he's like, you know, let me see if I can do a mock presentation to someone. So he goes to his wife and he's like, hey, I wrote a speech. So do you mind if I read it to you and you tell me how it is, you know? So he read the speech to his wife, and it was a pretty poor speech. You know, now the wife knows how much effort he put, and she realizes that speech is not doing the job. How do you break that news without like shattering someone's heart into pieces? I mean, you can say a lot of mean things, and especially with, you know, in a marriage, you know, you don't have filter after a while. I mean, 10 years into marriage, you're like, I'm not putting any disclaimers. I mean, she could have been like, you know, is this a speech or a sleeping aid? Huh? Sounds like an encyclopedia article. You know, there can be a lot of different things you could have said. You know what she said to him? She's like, you know, this would make an excellent article in National Review. That's the statement that she said. You know, this would make an amazing article. She wasn't being sarcastic. I know it sounds sarcastic because I said it after what she could have said. But she's like, you know, that would make an amazing article in a National Review. National Review is a magazine where you do product reviews. Subtly suggesting in the process it's really well done, but just not for this occasion. So according to the story, the man ripped his speech on the spot, and he realized, yeah, like this is great. It's a great product, just not for that customer. When you're doing a eulogy, it requires a little bit of passion, a little bit of self-reflection and all that stuff. And he was like, all right, I'm gonna restart without taking offense. So yeah, you know what I've noticed, subhanAllah, it's ajib, the human psychology. Back in the days when I was doing Darul Arqam, I noticed this multiple times, and I would ask myself, how do I turn this into a formula? When I would give somebody advice, and when you're giving advice, obviously you're asking them to improve, so it's always indirectly a criticism. I noticed something. Whenever I would give them advice, the person sitting right next to them, he's so keenly listening. Like I can tell he's like absorbing everything. But the guy I'm talking to, I'm working really hard to make sure that, I'm not becoming predictable and I'm not hurting his feelings or whatever. So I'm working hard to keep the person in front of me their attention. But the guy on the side, because it's not directed to him, it's completely indirect to him. Like I'm not even talking about that person. That person is readily absorbing, like a sponge, everything that I'm saying. And I realize this over and over again, that when you're not talking to someone and giving advice, they're so keen in listening because there's no ego filter. They're not putting up their claws. They don't feel like they're backed into a corner and they're readily taken. They're like, oh, he's not talking to me. He's just talking to someone else. So there's that neutral field and the advice just flows and penetrates the heart. But moment that same person who was so keenly listening, you put him in front of you and talk, and next thing you know, the hands go up and, and they're like all like crunched up. Amazing what indirectness does. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us this tact, this ability to work through human beings, Human beings are not robots.
What I notice is, especially like with converts, Brother Mir, like let's say somebody just converted to Islam and they have like a sleeve of tattoo.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Imagine that guy going into the masjid and the uncle just kind of like
loses it.
What are you doing in here with that? And like I just put myself in the guy's shoes, and like if I had a sleeve or something and I didn't know it was haram and I just became a Muslim yesterday, I'm already like, peace? This religion is for peace? I'm out of here.
Can I give you a less obvious version of this? You'll notice this a lot, that you'll have a convert or someone who is recently getting serious about the deen. Invariably, this will happen. I see this all the time. You'll have a halaqah. Let's say, when we did a qiyam through ISM core, so you create circles. Inevitably, you'll see that somebody who's a convert or someone who's new to the deen and they're kind of insecure about their deen, they end up talking a lot more sometimes. It's not always true, but they'll talk a lot for whatever reason, because this is their way of indirectly saying that, like I'm legit too. And they end up kind of hogging the entire conversation. And you're hoping someone else gets an opportunity to do that. We get it. Thank you. You love your deen. You're proud and passionate. Thank you very much. I got that an hour ago. Okay. People lose patience because they're like, why is this person hogging the conversation? And you have to subtly go and take that person to the side. They're like, I love, like, this is what I would plus them. If I'm talking to that person, like, I love the insight you have to offer. Like, literally, like, I was getting chills or like, I was blown away. And I'm hoping that we can bring some other stories of other people in the crowd to the surface as well. You wouldn't mind if we kind of pick on some other individuals. I don't want you to take it personally at all. It's just that I want to make sure that other such brilliant stories come to surface. Something along those lines, and hopefully that person doesn't feel like called out or whatever. So
this art of doing the plus minus reminds me a lot of how like very successful murabbis, like specifically educators, when they're trying to discipline their students or whoever it may be, they usually like befriend them in a way where like they show them their positive qualities, so that they're kind of showing the individual, I'm not waging war upon you, I'm trying to help you, before they criticize or discipline them. And that it's usually, it brings like change in the person. And yeah, that's something.
Absolutely.
Going off.
What they say? What do they say? Connect before you correct. Yeah. What does it say? You win the heart before. Anyway, I can't think of the other phrase. But Anas, you were saying?
Like going off what Sister Senna said is like, personally, I noticed that like when I love a teacher or like, when I see the chill side to them, as soon as like I know they're like really chill and like super nice, and the moment they get serious, I notice myself getting immediately serious with them. I don't want to break that really nice friendship or the really nice closeness that me and this teacher, cousin, whoever have.
SubhanAllah. Because their seriousness stands out in the backdrop of niceness. That's a powerful dynamic, by the way, as a murabbi, is that if niceness is your default and softness is your default, the moment you're not nice, you're not mean, you're just not being as nice as usual, that itself is a loud criticism. And you don't have to steep any further. The last thing, and I invite you guys, if you can think of a story from the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ where we learn prophetic art of criticism. The story that stands out to me, and I'll share with you, and if anybody can think of others, we'll end on this note. I love Seerah, you guys. As I hope it comes through my passion for Seerah. I feel like Seerah has to be studied deeply. Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, it's incredible just how many different facets Allah baked into his life. You guys know Qari Nu'man just passed away? Qari Nu'man's father just passed away. What made this entire ordeal really sad is that he was in India and there are no flights going to India and there are no flights coming out of India. So his father, who was with him in October 2019, and they went to India, there was not a slightest clue that this would happen. And next thing you know, they were supposed to return on March 27th. February, early March, all the flights are cut off because of COVID. The father is stuck over there. And the last moments of life were through FaceTime, not in person. Qari Nu'man has done funerals of how many? Countless. Yet he didn't get to do the funeral of his own father. Mufti Kamani or Sheikh Abdul Nasir were on the phone with him. You know what they told Mufti Qari Sahib to console him? They said, your story is like that of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that when he was coming back from Badr and the victory of Badr, Uthman was coming out of the grave, just finishing the burial of his own daughter. The Prophet's daughter passed away as he's at Badr. And as he gets back to Medina, Uthman is dusting off, coming out of the grave, finishing burying his daughter. He didn't get to bury his own daughter. I mean, of course, you want to do the funeral of your own family members, but then you're a prophet of God, and you doing the funeral can take somebody's reward to the next level. And Mufti Kamani or Sheikh Abdul Nasir were telling Qari Nu'man, Prophet didn't get to bury his own child, as you don't get to bury your own father. But notice how in Seerah even that's baked in. How many hardships our Prophet was made to suffer, so the Ummah has a sense of hope and respite, man. Anyway, our Prophet ﷺ, hadith comes in Bukhari, that a convert was in the house. I'm not trying to pick on the converts or anything. It's just that a lot of convert examples are coming up today. So there was a convert in the house, Muawiyah ibn Hakam. This is not the famous Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. This is different, Muawiyah ibn Hakam. Muawiyah had just accepted Islam. He joined the Prophet ﷺ in Asr prayer. Famous story, I've shared it before. And he didn't fully know the procedure of praying. So what happened is that Muawiyah is standing 2-3 rows behind the Prophet ﷺ, and as they're all in the prayer now, the Prophet has said Allahu Akbar, the prayer is in session, someone sneezes. And Muawiyah, being the convert, he's like, Alhamdulillah, really loud, with proper tajweed pronunciation, I'm sure. Convert in the house, mashallah. You want to get over that insecurity. At least that's my analysis of it. So people started giving him looks, telling him, you're in the prayer. This is not a chill, this is not a lounge we're sitting in. So people started giving him looks. And when people started giving him looks, he became upset. Because, once again, that insecurity. He's like, may your mothers lose you. Why are you looking at me? Because he feels like the fifth wheel, So when he started saying that, now people are like beating their knees, and this is like the final signal. This is like, like the red card. They're like, dude, be quiet. You're behind the Prophet who's leading the prayer. And there's a whole commotion happening behind the Prophet ﷺ. And so anyway, finally when the prayer was over, this is hadith in Bukhari or Muslim, Prophet calls him up. Muawiyah is like, I'm done. I'm going to be the poster child of failure, you know? And the Prophet is just like about to mop the floor with me. But he tells us in the hadith, ما رأيت معلما قبله وما بعده أحسن تعليما منه. I have never seen a teacher before him or after him more gentle in teaching than him. He said he called me up. He didn't criticize me. He didn't chastise me. He didn't call me names. All he told me, oh Muawiyah, when we're praying, the only thing that is appropriate for prayer is Allah's praise and the Quran. That's it. He's like, that's all he told me. He just taught me the alternative without shaming me to my core and calling me out for my ignorance. And that left an impression that he passed on this incident to his students. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make me better at this. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we all improve in this regard. Ameen ya Rabbil Alamin. Okay. That's all for today. Wow, it took an hour. SubhanAllah. Didn't expect. Okay, we'll do part 2 of this next time, y'all, inshallah. Any other comments, stories before we wrap up for the day?
So my question is, Brother Mir, and I don't want to make this like too long, but like, you know how you have to transition from the plus to the minus at that point? Because you're there to criticize.
Yes.
Start off with the plus. How do you like switch?
So when we get to the 2 methods that I'm going to share with you, and you will see in that method how the transition works. It's a brilliant question, by the way. Very, very spot on question, because that transition is hard. You plus them. Now, how do you shift the conversation and change the topic to the real deal, to the real business, right? So I'm going to share with you 2 methods. One is called the FBI method. Don't worry, it has nothing to do with the FBI, but it's just called FBI. It's an acronym. And the second is what we call carefrontation. As opposed to confrontation, carefrontation. When I share those 2 methods, you'll see the transition, inshallah. Anything else? Excellent. All right.
Oh, okay, before we go. So
is it related to this?
No.
Okay, let me just stop the recording. SubhanAllah, bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.